Well, my kids want me to make a bookshelf above their keyboard, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity to do some hand-cut dovetails. So I try to do a project using hand-cut dovetails about once a year just so I don't entirely forget how to do it. So I don't do it a ton, but enough. So at Menards, I was getting some pine boards for a bathroom project I was doing. And I found these, I don't even know what this is, some kind of interesting character on these pine boards. And I went ahead and bought them and thought, hey, it might make a cool project sometime. So that's what I'm going to make this shelf out of. It's going to be really long and it's going to be about that tall. So for hand cut dovetails, it's not that hard. It's really pretty easy. One tool you need is a marking gauge, and I have 3 different types of marking gauges. I think I got this one from Woodcraft, and it's got a roller blade on it there. And so this is the fence, and so this slides, and then you just tighten it down. And so this allows you to mark the wood like that, okay? Or you can mark it this way. Another option is these little, hopefully you can see them, and this is dusty because I don't use this one, but you can see these little teeth right here. And of course this is adjustable too. Again, it's a marking gauge, and it instead of this one having a sliding like a wheel that kind of cuts a line, this has that little nail, and you can scrape. Okay, so this one kind of tears the fibers out, I think, so I don't normally use this one that much. And then I use this one quite a bit. This one my dad made. And so this is a simple project that you could make. It's just a piece of wood, and then you got a nice little slide in there, and all he did was just glue this top board onto here, okay? And then it just has a little blade in it and a wedge that you would shove in that hole, okay? Hopefully you can see that. And this has this blade, and you can sharpen that blade. So it's similar to this being a slicing cut. And so this one to me works a little better. So this again is how I'm gonna mark the wood. So you have to have a marking gauge, any option like that. Okay, another thing you're gonna need is some kind of a dovetail gauge. You could possibly use one of these. If you have one, you could make that work, but I prefer, again, my dad made me this gauge just out of a piece of aluminum. Anybody could do that. You could use this to mark that and then cut that out and sand it. You can make one of these. I think I got these marking gauges from Veritas or somewhere, and they're cheap enough. So one has an HW on it because it's the angle that's preferred for hardwood, and then this one's for softwood. So I'm doing softwood, and so that'll be the angle that I'm using. They're very close. You can see that the angles are very close. There's actually not much difference, so I don't think it's that important. But you need a marking gauge. Then you need some kind of a straight edge, and so I have this saddle gauge. It allows you to come over like this, okay, to mark things, but you can simply just use a square to do something like that too, okay. You can use a pencil, but I prefer to use a marking knife. And so, especially when you transfer, so on your first cuts, which we'll show, you can just use a pencil because you're gonna saw those lines and they don't have to be exact. When you transfer that board over to the one that matches it, it needs to be pretty exact. So a pencil is pretty wide. And so I like to use a marking knife or marking knife of some kind. So my dad made me, this one's just a piece of metal and it's flat on one end, so that no bevel, and you could go, or you can get an X-Acto knife like this. You could even use probably a pocket knife or something, razor blade if you're careful, but this is something you need. Okay, some people use dividers to lay it out. And then you'll need a few chisels. You don't necessarily need them all. If you're doing really small pins, you will need a tiny, like 1/8 inch type chisel. And this is an one. Some people have marples. They are all good enough quality, really. And then this is a paring chisel that I have. It's a little bit sloped more compared to the other gouges that I'll be using to actually hit with a hammer. So this one's more of, you're not hitting this one with the hammer, you're paring with it. And then I've got this one's out, and one that you're going to use a lot of. It is tiring when you're holding your gouges. It kind of tires your fingers. So if you take a little bit of the handle off, to take a little bit of that weight off, it does make it easier and not as tiring on your fingers. So that's a little trick that I think Lonnie Bird showed me on a video a long time ago. These are Narex chisels. I don't know if they still make the same quality, but to me, these are good enough. I paid about 60 bucks for a whole set of them, all the way up to this size. So of course, I will use this for the small areas. And then whenever I'm making the final cut, where I'm actually putting this in the line that I marked with the knife, I like to use a little bit bigger chisel. So we'll show that in action when we do the actual dovetails. So another tool that you want to use is a coping saw. I will say you're going to need a saw of some kind. So you can use one of those cheap Japanese, I say cheap, they are, you know, $30 to $55. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them at Woodcraft, places like that, Veritas. They're very thin, right? And these cut on the pull stroke. You can get one of these and you can do dovetails. I do find that the teeth, if you can see how tiny the teeth are, these are very easy to control. The problem with these Japanese saws is if you're cutting in grain on like a hardwood, like oak or maple or something, these teeth do not hold up very long and they do break. So you end up having to replace these blades fairly often if you're going to do a lot of dovetails. Whenever I go to replace the blade, I often see that it's about as cheap just to buy a whole new saw. So I'll keep, like if the teeth break, I just keep this saw around to cut scraps or hand it down to my kids so that they can use it, because there'll be broken teeth, but you can still use the saw for a little bit. And it's just almost as cheap as to get a whole new saw. So I'll just keep the damaged saw to use and I'll get a whole new saw. Now I have some Veritas dovetail saws. I have one that's fine tooth, that's 16 teeth per inch. And then I have another one that's 14 teeth per inch. The 16 teeth per inch one is a little bit easier to get started. So I will use that. So you will need a saw of some kind. I do a lot of wood turning on this channel. You need some kind of a mallet. I actually like this little mallet I made with my kids for doing dovetails. It's really light, it's really small, so a little mallet is also nice to have. Okay, we'll get started.